People that have watched someone else's pets. What story didn't you tell the owner afterwards? One day we opened their front door and their dog bolted outside and took off. I chased him on foot until I got winded. He wouldn't come to either one of us because, well, he didn't know us that well. So I kept track of him for around 2 hours while my GF talked to neighbors to tell them to keep an eye out. Luckily he didn't stray past the block they lived in and we were able to get him and bring him inside. What a crap day that was. Don't chase dogs. Get their attention and then run away from them. It makes them want to play, and if you do it right you can either force them to run close enough you can grab them, or just chase you inside. The iguana got out and I lost it. It was gone for about 5 days when I found it behind the microwave. It was less green and more brown but still alive. I put him back and never told the owner. I also found a half-eaten onion on the counter that must have been his lunch one day. Still feel bad about it to this day. Our friend's hamster got out and ran into our walls. We would put lettuce and occasionally peanut butter on the floor for around 4 months until the hamster fell out of our ceiling onto a washing machine and died. I'm the owner who wasn't supposed to know. She left the gate open and the horses were loose all weekend. The neighbors apparently found it hilarious and told me it took her hours to catch them. Your dog wouldn't eat in front of me. Your dog would not poop in front of me. Either your dog did not eat or poop for 4 days, or there is poop hidden somewhere in the house. I have some interesting news for you about dogs and poop. When I was about 15-16, my mother showed my brother and I photos of these 2 men in the newspaper who were going around our area robbing homes and tying up the owners, putting them in a closet. So we were not to open the doors for strangers. At this time I was dog sitting for a neighbor down my street. They had a fairly large boxer about 9-10 months old, but he was still a huge baby and loved to jump around and play. So one day that week I get to the house, put his leash on and take him out back to do his business. The house was a corner unit, so the driveway was almost an extension of their backyard, so from the driveway about a third or so of the yard is visible, while outside, an old beat up Toyota pulls into the driveway and 2 guys wearing bandanas hiding their faces jump out of the car almost instantly after the car stopped. They spot me and start running towards me, not seeing that I had the boxer on the leash trailing behind me. They made their way a solid 15-20 feet until the boxer was in view. Now the dog starts to get excited, so he begins to hop around, giving me a hard time controlling him with the leash. My heart started racing as I started to put 2 and 2 together, and just as they got a view of the jumping dog, they hopped back into the Toyota and GTFO'd so fast they left smoke and burnt rubber on the driveway. Never told them their house almost got robbed and their dog essentially saved me hours of being tied up in their closet. I love boxers. They're most often just huge muscular babies. Mine curls up like a shrimp and wiggles when she's excited. When I was 9 or so, my parents volunteered to watch our friend's goldfish. Said friends brought the goldfish to our house. In retrospect this was an awful idea, but I was 9 and was definitely not in charge of this decision. Every single goldfish died. I think there were 4 or 5. The stress was just too much for them, I think, and by the time a week was up, they were all gone. Turns out the kids' grandparents had bought the fish at Walmart, so we bought identical replacements fish for them after talking to the parents about it. So, the parents knew, but the kids never did. We were sworn to secrecy. The funniest part of this is that one of those fish lived 10 years. Swear to God. Grew quite a bit and then ate anything put in its tank, including 1 or 2 algae eaters. We moved 8 years later. Fish was still there. We'd ask about him every once in a while. He even survived cats trying to eat him, the whole 9 yards. I kind of loved that fish. The mom wasn't amused though. Guess she hadn't anticipated taking care of the same freaking fish when her oldest went to college. Goldfish are no joke. They can live up to 20 years. Watched a friend's cat when they were out of town for the week. Dropped in once a day to scoop litter, feed and water it, and socialize a little bit. The family kept him as a mostly outdoor cat, but for the week they were gone he was an indoor cat. Or at least, he was until I accidentally opened the front door for too long one day while leaving, and he zipped through my legs into sweet freedom. I chased that cat for 3 blocks before he hopped a fence and I lost him. There was literally no way me following him was going to happen. so I went home. Next day I go back to the house and there's Kitty, sitting in front of the house door meowing pitifully, super ready to go inside and eat kibble. Never told my friend that I had for 24 hours basically given up their cat for lost. I'm late, but this is finally something I can answer. I was watching an episode of The Walking Dead. Spoiler alert I guess. It was the episode where Herschel gets bit and has to get his foot and part of his leg cut off. Anyways, I watch the episode and as the credits come up I start walking to the bathroom. As I'm walking and about to turn into the bathroom, the cat runs up to my cuff and grabs it with her claws as a way to play with me. I however, had just seen Herschel get jumped. I reflex kicked my leg in the air and the cat flew off me and hit the top of the bathroom door frame. Everything seemed fine, but still I drove her to the vet and paid for the visit myself. She was totally fine. I still pet sit for these people almost monthly, and they'll never know I sent their cat flying 8 feet in the air. Field goal. A family friend's super well-trained Labradoodle had serious resource guarding border guarding issues. She eventually attacked and mangled my favorite chicken because she got too close to the dog's toy. Chuck ended up in several pieces, which the dog then guarded as well. I was like 14 and never mentioned it. Now I work as a dog trainer and said family friend still tries to give me awful training advice, usually found in Facebook posts or message boards, and it takes everything in me to bite my tongue. R.I.P. Attila the hen. A family friend asked me to take care of their dog when I was around 11. What they failed to mention was that their dog just had surgery and could only eat select few foods. So I feed their dog a spoonful of peanut butter, as they normally allowed me to do, and it starts puking everywhere. I mean everywhere. The poor thing was so sick, and the house smelled so bad. I was freaking out and crying because I was 11, and used Clorox wipes and Lysol to clean the loads of vomit up. If it makes you feel any better, that's a massive frick up on their part, not yours. Any decent pet owner should have told the person who was watching, hey, my pet just had surgery, please don't do X, Y or Z thing if there was base rules you were used to. Looking after my auntie's dog while she went to a wedding. She always babied her, never let her do anything and gushed over her every time she so much as stumbled. I was given strict instructions how to care for her, including don't let her off the lead. So I took her for a walk and she was loving it. Poor thing was delighted. I felt sorry for this pampered pooch and wanted her to have fun, so I did something stupid. I let her off the lead. I know. Bloody terrible idea, but I was 14. Never had a dog before, and it was a huge field, so I went for it. At first it went great. No recall problems. Rosie having a blast zooming through all the long grass. Awesome. But then we come across a huge puddle right in the path from some heavy rain. Bam. She's right in it. Not deep enough to drown or swim or anything, but deep enough for her to intentionally stick her whole head under. She'd only gotten groomed the day before. After much yelling and near hyperventilating, I managed to encourage her back to me, clipped her on the lead and whisked her home. My mum opened the door to a mud splattered me and this sodden water rat. We spent the next hour trying to get her dry and preened up to standards, but my auntie never asked me to look after her again, so I think she knew. We had fun though, didn't we, Rosie? Poor dog. One time I got my dog back from a friend with dried mud through her fur. I laughed when they told me how it had happened. I just gave her a bath a couple of days later and that was that. Seems like you didn't do anything wrong. Letting a dog that's not yours on the lead is kind of stupid, but the dog was completely fine. A bit of mud never hurt anything. Dogs just love it. Coming from the other side of this as an owner, as a teenager, I went away on holiday with my parents for a week. At that time I had 5 guinea pigs. Normally they went into the local vet's boarding facility when we were away, but on this occasion my uncle and cousin said they would look after them. I do not know why my dad agreed to let his brother take care of them, as my uncle is the only one in the family who appears to have little ability for the most simple practical tasks. He lurches from one disaster to another, permanently in debt, and his house is literally falling down around him as he can't or won't make the simplest repairs, such as fixing a leaking tap. Anyway, we came back home, perhaps unsurprisingly, to find the garage a wreck. The hutches stank to high heavens. poo and sawdust over the floor, an empty water bottle and one dead guinea pig. Of course cousins feigned surprise and said they'd been over every day. All piggies fine and water bottle was full. It was clear they were lying and pretty sure the GP was dead a few days. I suspect they only visited once but would dearly like to have known what actually happened. That is so sad. Poor guinea pigs, and I can't wait believe they let them die. That's horrible. That their bunnies spent most of the week in the small indoor cage. They escaped their outdoor pen twice in the first few days. Chasing 2 rabbits around the cul-de-sac for several houses was enough to turn me off pet rabbits forever. My brother's puppy tried for hours to hump his dog bed. Took me a while to realize that's what he was going for, but at that point he'd been pulling it around the room for 10 minutes unable to make any progress. I just let him try fruitlessly until he tired himself out. I'm glad he couldn't actually manage to hump it, because I didn't want any part in that situation. I had a dumbass dog that tried to hump the cat. Poor cat had no idea how to react and just meowed until someone came to check on her. Then she'd glare her signature "I did not sign up for this bulls." My ex-girlfriend's dad had a pug, and I was tasked with taking care of it for a week while they were both out of town. Now, this pug was extremely hyperactive and spastic. It couldn't sit still for 2 minutes without jumping all over you, getting in your face, grunting obnoxiously, and running full sprint back and forth across the room. It was a nice enough dog, but very annoying. One night, I had a couple of friends over and, naturally, we decided to eat a bunch of mushrooms. The dog was going ape crap, and my friend decided to blow a bong hit in its face. Looking back, I realized that getting an animal stoned is a cruel thing to do, but at that age I hadn't thought enough about it. Be that as it may, the pot seemed to be exactly what the dog needed. She instantly mellowed out, curled up at my feet, and looked super relaxed. No more snorting, no more running, no more incessant attempts at licking my face. It was amazing. Just as the mushrooms began to really kick in, I remembered something funny and decided to show my friends. This dog, when picked up and placed on a linoleum floor, would basically lose motor ability. It would sort of scramble and prance around until cluelessly and clumsily swimming off the tile after a few seconds. My ex's dad would occasionally do this for laughs, and we'd always shower her with affection afterwards because it was so cute. So I said, "Hey, check this out. You guys will love this," and I took the dog into the kitchen. I gently placed her down on the tile and waited for the stupid comedy to commence. And, oh, it did. She began scrambling and flailing around, and we all stood around cracking up heavily. What a treat. But then, before any of us could even comprehend what had happened, we saw it, a cascading river of Hershey brown liquid fesses at incredibly low viscosity, smeared everywhere. It happened so fast. Crap on the tile, crap on the cabinets, crap sprayed across the fridge door, and of course, crap all over the legs and underside of this poor, terrified, helpless dog. The effects of the weed she'd been enjoying apparently dissipated immediately, because this dog proceeded to completely flip out, running headlong across the carpet and into every room in the apartment with her trademark sprint. Everywhere we looked, there was fesses. 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 Incomprehensible fesses. So, right at about the peak of the mushroom trip, with everything looking insane and all of us tasting colors and what have you, I had to put the dog in the bathtub and wash her down before getting on my hands and knees and cleaning up what seemed like absolute buckets of liquid poop strewn across my entire apartment. The stains came out, but the scars stayed on me forever. This was my personal Vietnam, and the last time I ever watched someone else's pet. I hear mushrooms are good for PTSD. I was dog sitting my ex's Westie and he somehow got himself off of his leash when I took him out for a pee in the morning. He ran away and we couldn't find him for hours. Finally got him back in the late afternoon. That's one story I decided never to tell my ex because she worshipped that dog. So my mom was really close with my high school principal's family during the time I was in high school. They asked us if we can watch their little yappy dog for a few days over one of our school breaks. My mom of course says yes. After having this dog for a day we decided to go out to dinner with our family. We go out and everything is great, but when we come back we find a surprise. We find my principal's dog's mouth covered in blood and my sister's hamster torn apart in her room. Needless to say, my mom did not want us to get some unearned brownie points from our principal, so we never told him. Poor hamster. My boyfriend at the time was upset because his own dog died. I was watching the dog next door and invited him over to chat and comfort him. He sat on the floor with my neighbor's beagle and hugged him and burst out crying. He played with the dog for a while and it helped him get through that rough night. I didn't tell my neighbors because I felt it would have been weird to tell them I had a friend over to their house, whom they never met. I didn't want to worry them. Man, that's just so sad. I'd do the same thing if I was in that place. He seems sweet that way. Their Doberman drank half my tea when I left it unguarded for a minute. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but I use xylitol as a sweetener. Luckily a large dog needs more than a half teaspoon worth of xylitol to do any real damage, so after being lethargic for a couple hours, he was fine. I still feel terrible though. My fiance and I had house dog sat for this couple and their kids on a number of occasions. Their dog was a little black toy poodle that had the kindest, most gentle disposition of any dog I have ever met. This time, we were looking after him in the house for 2 weeks. For 13 days, everything was awesome. Took Hugo for a walk in the mornings, and when got home from work, and then he would fall asleep curled up against one of us in the evenings. Perfect little guy. Then the last day came along. We were packing up all of our stuff and doing the last minute tidy of the house, and I was taking our bags out to the car at around 11 AM. The family's flight landed at 12:30. I walked out to the car and just left the front fly screen open about 2 centimeters. Dumped our bags in the boot, walked back inside, and immediately could sense a lack of dog. I walked through the house from room to room looking for him, but I knew he had bolted. Starting to get a little frantic, my fiance and I started walking up and around the neighborhood yelling out for Hugo, with no luck. 12:30 comes and we get a message from the family saying we've just landed. See you in about half an hour. Can't wait to see Hugo. My fiance by this stage is freaking the frick out and keeps giving me looks like she is either going to throw up or stab me for losing the dog. I had resigned myself to having to tell the family I had lost their dog and was walking back to the house, and I was just turning the corner to their house when a young girl came power walking down the footpath with this little black bundle pulling her along. I ran up to her and asked, "Where did you find him?" She said he looked out her kitchen window and he was just having a nap on their recliner chairs in their backyard in the sun. I thanked her profusely and got her details so we could give her a reward later on, and then took Hugo home. I had just closed the door after putting him in the house, turned around just as they pulled into their driveway. Well, I was on a cam. She told me she used it with the last pet sitter. She didn't trust anyone since he was not reliable, so I agreed to watch her 2 dogs and house sit when she went out of town. I'm sure she forgot she told me about the cam. Anyway, her dogs like to argue or play fight just before bed, so the lights were off. I was sleeping on the couch and her dogs started play fighting. I kept trying to stop them. I kept poking them to get them to stop and kept getting up to separate them. Suddenly, I get a text from her asking if everything was okay. I said yes, everything is fine, all is well. I didn't tell her I remembered she used a cam on the last person, but clearly she was watching me at that moment. Not sure if this counts. I was maybe 10 or 11. The neighbors had a hobby farm with sheep and would go away often in the summer to their cottage. My friend and I were feeding the sheep one afternoon when we noticed a really old blind one that wasn't eating. We had this brilliant idea of putting a bucket of food near her, away from the rest of the herd. She obviously had no idea, so we tried to gently herd her towards the bucket. She got freaked out and bolted right into an electric fence. My friend grabbed the electric fence in a panicked rage, and then we remembered we were wearing rubber boots, which quite frankly I'm very impressed about since we were 2 10-year-old girls with zero experience with science and silly enough to go around touching electric fences. The sheep died like 2 weeks later, not sure if from old age or from the ordeal. My daughter, who was in college at the time and living in a house near campus, was watching a friend's dog. When she needed to go out of town for the weekend, she asked if she could leave the very elderly dog with us. I agreed. As long as our German Shepherd Lab mix got along with the dog, they seemed to do fine. So I agreed to keep the old pup for the weekend. Every time someone walked near the dog, it panicked and peed all over our tile. I felt so sorry for the dog, but the final insult for this poor pup who was not adapting well to yet another new surrounding was when our dog decided to try to play. He playfully nudged the older, much smaller dog, who then tipped over as if it were a statue. Our dog looked up at me with the saddest eyes, as if to say, I think I broke it. The poor old dog survived its weekend as our guest, but I'll never forget the look on our dog's face when he toppled the smaller dog over. Like a fainting goat. Not me, but my sister is sort of like that girl from Animaniacs. Lots of dead fish growing up. Anyway, we were living out of state and she made friends and agreed to watch their cats while they went on vacation. They were both kittens. They got fleas and she had a spray from her own adult cat. She was going to spray it. I hear caskrunk, 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 caskrunk. I said, did you even read the directions? The bottle said 1 caskrunk for adult cats only between the shoulders. This kitten was 4 caskrunk and undoused. It started retching and shivering. It lay down for a long time. A few months later her friends said it died of cancer. Oh my god, that poor kitten. My auntie and uncle are very precious about their pets. They got a new greyhound pup and I was at my nan and pa's when they were looking after him. He was outside playing with me and went sprinting inside because my pa had food for him. Unfortunately his depth perception was a bit off because he ran full pelt into the door frame and then yelped real loud and limped off. He was fine 5 minutes later and the paw he was favoring didn't seem to be causing any issues. Kept that one a secret. That was 6 months ago and Pup Loki is still fine and still runs into things. One of my former housemates had a friend with a cat. Said friend had to move home for a month, where her siblings were allergic to cats, so my housemate convinced me to have the cat live at our house for a month or 2 until her friend got a new apartment. It wasn't until 3 weeks in that I found out that this cat had not been neutered. I was not told this at first, but I had my suspicions. I had a friend who visited and crashed overnight on the living room couch. This frisky cat decided to hump the living frick out of his leg multiple times during the night. A couple days later, this frisky cat got into my housemate's bedroom, found her laptop, and went to town like a 13-year-old who just discovered free internet pee. She returned home to find fresh kitty love gravy on said laptop. I haven't said a thing. Neither has my housemate, as far as I know. Upvote for fresh kitty love gravy. My ex, P, and I were dog sitting his uncle's 2 Dachshunds. P's uncle and uncle's husband lived in a nice house with P's grandmother. They were vacationing in Italy. Roz and Lucy, the whiners, were very playful and we were tossing the ball to Roz back and forth and he eventually got tired, or so we thought. So we're on the back deck having a smoke and suddenly we hear this ripping sound. We immediately check things out and Roz is tearing up the couch skirt. Turns out the ball rolled under the couch, but we messaged P's uncle about it and they had a friend come by and sew it up and we never told the grandmother. The house was very nice and the furniture was very expensive, so that is one that we have kept under wraps. It's been about 2 years and I'm still friends with said uncle on FB and he checks up on me once in a while and have heard nothing. We were petrified when it happened. I lived with this dog but it wasn't technically mine. I had a different work schedule than everyone else, so I would tend to the dog while everyone else was away. This dog really loved me, and he would sit in my lap for several hours every day, and commonly beg at my door to be let in if he didn't get to see me. He was extremely sweet. He was also very trustworthy. We could let him outside, and most of the time we would watch just in case, but he would do his business in our yard and promptly come back without even thinking about going far. This time I had left him outside ever so slightly longer than usual, which he usually wouldn't mind since he loves to sunbathe and play in grass. But this time he must have been done early, paired with me coming to get him late. When I went out he was gone. Turns out he had gone to our back door to see if I would let him in there. I could see the freshly wet paw prints on our deck. Well, the only problem was by the time I had gotten to the back door he had already given up on the back door. This is when I start to panic. How long has he been waiting? Where could he be? I call my girlfriend. Her parents own the dog, and freak out. She tells me to calm down and that we will find him. I go to the front door to start my neighborhood search and he is just sitting there waiting for me. One time one of our dogs ran away. We found him 20 minutes later on someone else's front porch. He tried to go home but forgot where he lived. One time I dog sit for friends of my mom. They had 4 large dogs, one of which was mostly deaf. They lived on this huge property in the woods, so walking the dogs meant walking them around the path out back with these tracker collars instead of leashes. First time I take them on their noon walk, the deaf one keeps going off the path. I click the button for her collar to call her back. No response. So I chase her off the path with the other 3 dogs in tow, but she keeps going off in random directions until I completely lose her. Then I realized I was lost in the woods. I then start trying to find the path again, with the other 3 dogs still in tow. No luck. I run into the deaf one again but she just goes off on her own again. I start to panic. At this point I'm starting to feel tired and dehydrated, and maybe it was my imagination but the dogs looked tired and dehydrated too. I finally cut my losses with the deaf dog and decide to focus on saving the 4 of us and go out again looking for her later once the other dogs were safely in the house. I had my phone and tried to pull out the GPS to find my way back to the house, but there's no cellular data signal. I try to use a compass app to go in the direction that I assume I would need to go. Also doesn't work. 2 of the dogs that are with me start to get impatient with me and start to go off in other directions. Luckily I'm able to verbally call them back because the trackers don't seem to be working for them either, but I'm getting nervous about them running off too. I keep on stamping through brambles while my legs get cut up, at this point completely desperate to just get out of these woods. I finally come across a sign that indicates someone else's property. I decided to just walk past the sign and into the other property, hoping that it will take me to the road. It does. I've never been so happy to see a lawn in my entire life. I walk through the yard with the dogs and back to the house, where the deaf dog was sitting on the porch, waiting to be let in. I go inside with all 4 dogs and take their tracker collars off. I was terrified to go out again and put the deaf dog on a leash for safety. Then as I'm putting the tracker collars on the other dogs I realize why no one was responding to the trackers. I hadn't turned them on. 2 hours lost in the woods. My legs now covered in scratches and mud and my pants torn. And living with the traumatizing thought that I had lost these people's sweet old dog during the whole event. And it was all because I didn't turn the trackers on. Needless to say I did not tell them. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.